The housing market today feels completely broken. Sales activity has collapsed to levels not seen since the 1990s, yet home prices are still sitting near record highs almost everywhere people actually want to live. My name is Ben, and I explain personal finance using three different versions of myself to show you how different types of people make decisions based on their current financial situation. Broke Ben stares at Zillow listings at midnight, wondering how a small three-bedroom house with old carpet somehow costs more than his parents' dream home ever did. Every listing feels like the entire country collectively lost its mind. Budget Ben notices something even stranger. Normally, when fewer people buy houses, prices fall, but this market refuses to behave the way basic economics says it should. Baller Ben understands the market is not crashing. It is frozen. Buyers cannot afford to buy, sellers do not want to sell, and both sides are trapped in a financial standoff. Most people keep waiting for some giant 2008-style collapse that suddenly makes homes affordable again. But today's housing problem is completely different from the last crisis. Back in 2019, the median home price in America was around $272,000. Today, that number is closer to $418,000, and in many cities, even average homes are far above that. Broke Ben focuses only on the listing price because he thinks monthly payments somehow magically work themselves out later. Then reality punches him in the face the moment he sees the mortgage calculator. Budget Ben immediately notices the bigger issue is not just price increases. Interest rates exploded at the exact same time housing prices surged higher. Baller Ben understands that housing affordability depends on two things working together: the cost of the home and the cost of borrowing money. When both rise simultaneously, affordability gets destroyed. During the pandemic, mortgage rates dropped to unbelievably low levels, near 2.65%. Cheap debt suddenly made expensive homes feel affordable on a monthly payment basis. Broke Ben saw low rates and assumed houses would stay cheap forever. He started talking about buying oversized homes with massive kitchens and luxury upgrades he absolutely could not sustain long term. Budget Ben realized low rates massively increased purchasing power. People who previously qualified for smaller homes suddenly qualified for houses hundreds of thousands of dollars more expensive. Baller Ben saw the dangerous side effect immediately. Cheap money almost always creates asset inflation because buyers start bidding against each other with borrowed money. The Federal Reserve poured enormous amounts of stimulus into the economy during 2020. Interest rates were pushed near zero while massive bond purchases flooded the financial system with liquidity. That easy money environment supercharged housing demand almost overnight. Millions of people rushed into the market trying to lock in cheap mortgages before rates changed. At the exact same time, COVID completely changed how people thought about their homes. Houses stopped being just places to sleep and suddenly became offices, schools, gyms, and entertainment centers. Broke Ben realized he hated living in a tiny apartment once he had to spend every hour inside it. Suddenly he wanted extra bedrooms, a backyard, and enough space to separate work from life. Budget Ben noticed remote work gave people something they never had before: geographic flexibility. Workers were no longer forced to live close to expensive downtown office buildings. Baller Ben understood this would completely reshape migration patterns across America. Once people realized they could work remotely, they started chasing lower taxes, cheaper homes, and more space. People fled expensive cities like New York and San Francisco, searching for affordability elsewhere. Smaller markets suddenly experienced huge waves of incoming buyers almost overnight. Cities like Austin, Phoenix, Boise, and Nashville exploded with demand. Inventory was already tight, and suddenly thousands of additional buyers were competing for the same limited homes. Broke Ben saw bidding wars and assumed housing would only go up forever. He started believing buying any house at any price was automatically a good financial decision. Budget Ben noticed prices were rising far faster than incomes. The math was becoming disconnected from what average households could realistically support. Baller Ben saw classic overheating behavior forming across the market. When people start buying out of fear instead of logic, prices often detach from economic fundamentals. National home prices surged roughly 37% in just 2 years. Some cities experienced gains above 50 or even 60%, numbers that historically take decades, not months. Then inflation arrived with full force. Food, gas, cars, rent, and everyday necessities all became dramatically more expensive across the economy. The Federal Reserve suddenly had a new problem. The same low rates that fueled growth were now fueling runaway inflation. Broke Ben barely paid attention to inflation until he realized his grocery bill doubled while his paycheck stayed mostly the same. Then he started putting everyday expenses on credit cards just to maintain his lifestyle. Budget Ben understood rising inflation meant interest rate hikes were inevitable. Cheap money cannot last forever when prices across the economy spiral upward. Baller Ben knew the Fed would likely move aggressively because inflation had reached levels not seen in decades, and aggressive rate hikes always hit housing hard. The Federal Reserve rapidly increased interest rates from near zero to over 5%. It became the fastest tightening cycle in roughly 40 years. Mortgage rates followed immediately. Rates that once sat below 3% suddenly climbed above 7% at their peak. That single change completely transformed affordability. The same exact house suddenly required dramatically higher monthly payments, even if the price never changed. Broke Ben cannot understand how a house listed at the same price suddenly costs over $1,000 more per month. He thinks banks are secretly scamming everyone. Budget Ben understands the brutal reality of compound borrowing costs. Higher rates massively increase total payments over the life of a mortgage. Baller Ben focuses on cash flow instead of sticker price. He knows the monthly payment determines whether someone actually survives financially after buying the home. This created one of the largest affordability collapses in modern housing history. In many markets, buyers are now tens of thousands of dollars short of the income needed to comfortably afford average homes. The average household income simply has not kept up with the combination of rising prices and rising rates. For many younger buyers, homeownership now feels mathematically impossible. Broke Ben responds emotionally and starts doom-scrolling housing videos all day. He becomes convinced he will either become rich overnight or rent forever. Budget Ben starts adjusting expectations instead. Maybe the first home is smaller, farther away, or delayed several more years than originally planned. Baller Ben understands something uncomfortable. Sometimes the smartest financial move is waiting patiently instead of forcing a bad purchase under social pressure. But there is another massive reason prices have not collapsed. Millions of homeowners locked in mortgage rates below 4% during the pandemic years. Some homeowners even hold rates below 3%. Giving up that loan today would mean replacing incredibly cheap debt with dramatically more expensive financing. This created what economists call the lock-in effect. People who might normally move are financially trapped inside their current mortgage. Broke Ben thinks homeowners are greedy for not selling. He does not realize many sellers would actually increase their monthly costs by moving into a similar house today. Budget Ben understands why inventory remains so low. Even homeowners who want more space, different cities, or lifestyle changes hesitate because the financial penalty is enormous. Baller Ben realizes the market is stuck in a giant stalemate. Buyers cannot afford current prices, but sellers refuse to give up cheap financing. The housing shortage itself also did not appear overnight. America has been underbuilding homes ever since the 2008 financial crisis. Builders became far more cautious after the crash. Many focused on higher-end homes because profit margins were larger and financing conditions were safer. That meant fewer starter homes entered the market for over a decade. Meanwhile, population growth and household formation kept increasing demand. Material costs, labor shortages, zoning restrictions, and tariffs made construction even more expensive. Building affordable homes became increasingly difficult across many regions. Broke Ben keeps waiting for a giant crash, identical to 2008, because that is the only housing story he remembers hearing about. He assumes prices must collapse eventually, simply because they feel unfair. Budget Ben notices today's market looks very different from the subprime era. Borrowers generally have stronger credit profiles and far more home equity than during the last crisis. Baller Ben understands this is not primarily a credit collapse problem. It is a structural affordability and supply problem. Foreclosures remain relatively low compared to the financial crisis years. Most homeowners are not underwater because many locked in lower prices and lower rates before the surge. That is why the market feels frozen instead of crashing. Inventory stays low, transactions stay low, and both sides wait for conditions to improve. Younger generations are feeling the pressure the most. First-time homebuyers are now averaging around age 40 instead of their late 20s. Many millennials and Gen Z households are delaying marriage, children, and major life decisions because housing costs consume such a massive portion of income. Some have completely given up on buying altogether. Broke Ben keeps chasing headlines, hoping someone on the internet will tell him exactly when the market crashes. Budget Ben focuses on improving his finances, increasing flexibility, and making decisions based on actual numbers instead of emotions. Baller Ben understands the housing market will probably adjust slowly over many years, rather than through one dramatic collapse. The real lesson is not trying to perfectly time the market. It is making housing decisions based on personal financial math, long-term stability, and the life you actually want to build. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about the housing market from the view of 3 different versions of myself. Remember that you have the majority control over your emotions and decisions when it comes to your finances. Subscribe for more helpful money tips from the money faces of Ben.